Reach Out Your Hand by MC Coy. Chapter 4. The History of the Kaminari Family. Shinso felt his heart shatter as the blonde servant left the room, not understanding how he could go from holding the radiant man in his arms to nothing the next second. Quickly, that heartbreak turned to anger as he glared at his confused sister. "Why would you say that?" "Say what?" she asked in confusion. "I always tease you about Monoma. Why would now be any different?" "Because Hitoshi cut himself off, not wanting to spill his true feelings to his sister. "You know I don't like him, so why must you always bring it up?" "I was just teasing," she tried to defend herself. "Why does it matter right now? We should be going after Denki. He didn't look too good." For once, Hitoshi had to agree, already walking to the door before a hand on his shoulder stopped him. He turned with a glare, daring whoever touched him to try and stop him. Momo instantly pulled her hand back, but stood her ground, used to the royal family enough to know not to back down when it was important. "I'm sorry, my prince, but as Denki's friend I won't advise going after him right now." "And why not?" he said with a growl. "Because he is impossible to find when he wants to hide," Jiro spoke up from where she was still clutching her violin. "He knows how to stay out of sight when he wants to. You would be just wasting your time looking for him." Hitoshi silently cursed, realizing they were probably right when he never seemed to find the servant when he searched earlier in the week. Plus, he was only supposed to help us for a little while, and a washer of the castle he has much to do to prepare for the upcoming ball. "I see," Hitoshi ground out, not at all happy with this, but seeing that he didn't really have a choice in this matter. "Then I suppose I'll be taking my leave as well." "Of course, your highness." Momo and Jiro bowed to him while his sister was giving him a weird look. He didn't like how hard she was thinking about this interaction and quickly reached over to ruffle her hair. "I'll see you at dinner, brat." "Stop! You are so rude!" she yelled back, swatting his hand away. Feeling like he got his revenge on her, he left the room and started to walk down the hall with no real destination in mind, but just needed some time alone to think. He let out a frustrated sigh as his mind instantly wandered to the blonde servant that somehow captured his attention. He had never seen the particular servant before, but he was instantly smitten the moment he first laid eyes on him. How could he not? He had first seen him the night he couldn't sleep, the date of the ball looming over his head like a death sentence. He never liked big crowds, especially crowds that were solely there for him. It always felt fake. All the smiles, the etiquette, the conversations, everything was crafted to ensure they had the best chance of gaining his favour, and he hated it. Hitoshi was always told by his father that his sharp eyes and blunt tone would surely make him enemies if he didn't learn to hold his tongue, but it's not his fault that he was able to see people's true intentions and didn't want to waste time playing along in their little charade. He knew his father hated it as well, but it was part of the job, and if he was ever going to be king, he was going to have to play it as well. His papa always tried to tell him that it wasn't so bad, that he just needed to find some good company, and maybe a partner, to help make it more bearable. Unfortunately, most of his friends were part of the guards, or his servants, always having found it easier to connect with them, but unable to have them join him at these events. Bakugo and Kirishima do come to show off their metals when they have time, and Midoriya is almost always hiding in some wig just in case he needed him, but it wasn't the same. Hitoshi had too many guests to greet or talk to be able to hang with them for long, unless he wanted to be considered rude. He does have a few noble friends, and as a kid he enjoyed talking to them. Monoma was his best friend for the longest time, but then they started to grow up, learned about the hierarchy and how to gain power, and Monoma decided he liked the idea of becoming king. Papa would always say he developed a crush once he realized how handsome he grew up to be, but Hitoshi knew him well enough to know his true intentions. He might actually have feelings for him, but the crown was his true goal, and he wanted no part in it. He wanted no part in any of it, but it was tradition, and he can't just break tradition because he didn't like it. So here he was, shuffling around in the dark castle, hating how spotless it was because it just certified that the ball was just around the corner. He groaned to himself, feeling far too tired to even think about it, but wound up with enough anxiety that sleep wasn't possible. It really sucks being a prince sometimes. He knows that he is very privileged and is thankful for his father and papa have done for him, but the act of finding his perfect someone at these events seemed impossible. All anyone wanted to do was compliment him or try to butter him up to win his favour, all their words being sweet lies on their tongues. Or they would get bold and ask him to dance, thinking they could win him with the time one song allotted them. Dancing was unbearable at this point. All anyone would do was talk his ear off about how they would be a great match or how the kingdom would benefit from their marriage. It was exhausting, and left him with nothing but an empty feeling in his chest and sore feet. There was no point to it, no reason to dance if all it was to everyone was a chance to woo him. He didn't want to be wooed or hit on or bargained with, he just wanted a real connection with someone, damn it. He knows it was a luxury as prince to be able to choose his intended, and he wasn't going to waste the opportunity. Unfortunately, his standards are his father and papa, who have been in love for years before his father was even crowned king. They have a true connection to each other that Hitoshi craves to also experience with someone he can call his own, but said person doesn't seem to exist. He has searched, upon his papa's request, to find this person, to get to know and talk to people to find them, but no one stood out to him. No one made his heart sing or was able to break his perfectly constructed mask. He was considered a stone wall by many of his peers for his lack of emotion and calm demeanour, but that is only because he hasn't found anyone worth showing his true colours to. His musing was cut off by the sound of soft humming. Hitoshi quickly ducked between two pillars in the hopes that the late-night guard won't see him and tell his parents he was wandering the castle again. But after a few minutes of waiting and nothing happening, Hitoshi peeked around the corner, seeing he had somehow wandered to the ballroom and a lone servant was mopping it. He gasped as he watched the servant work, never seeing such unrefined beauty before. The servant had blonde hair that seemed to shine in the moonlight, an interesting black streak breaking up his bangs and drawing his attention to his golden eyes that seemed to sparkle like two fireflies dancing in the wind. The young man looked around his age, but shorter than him, his lean frame accentuated by the apron servants that typically clean had to wear. He was breathtaking, but the thing that really caught his attention was when the servant suddenly started to move. He watched as he bowed to the mop, then started to dance to the song he was humming, moving with grace, yet somehow carefree movements. It was like watching a stream trickle by on a warm summer day, feeling relaxed and refreshed at the same time. Hitoshi's fingers twitched, picturing what it would be like to dance with a man, seeing himself in place of the mop as he led the shorter man around the room for all to see. He felt stunned, never once having thought something like that before in his life, but it was hard not to as he continued to watch the blonde. His movements and expressive face just gave way to exactly what he was feeling, and Hitoshi soaked up those positive, joyful rays, like a man that deprived of the sun his whole life. This servant just felt different. Maybe it was the fact that he was brave enough to dance while he thought no one was looking, or just danced with passion he had never seen before. But deep down he knew he had to dance with this person. Something in his bones begging him to reach out to him and sweep him off his feet like he knew the man deserved. Unfortunately, he had waited too long, the blonde having finished cleaning and was now picking up his stuff to leave. Hitoshi quickly got back to his hiding place, not even daring to breathe as the cute blonde skipped by, his heart beating in time with his steps as he went. He waited a while longer to ensure the blonde was really out of sight before leaving his spot, a smile stretching across his face as he looked at where the blonde had last been. He might have missed his chance tonight, but he will definitely have another while at the ball. Hitoshi swiveled on his heels, marching towards his father's study with purpose. He didn't even know if he was still up, but he had an idea that could probably save him from countless dances and ensure that he was able to dance with the blonde man. The smile stayed on his face the entire walk, a small bounce in his step as he thought about his genius plan. He was an idiot. His plan had worked perfectly but also terribly at the same time. His father readily agreed with allowing him to deny all dances as long as at least dance. He was an idiot. His plan had worked perfectly but also terribly at the same time. His father readily agreed with allowing him to deny all dances as long as he at least danced once with the person he had in mind. His papa was a little mad at the arrangement being made while he was asleep, but soon became overflowed with excitement that his son had a crush on someone, and was practically playing I Spy all night trying to guess who had captured his attention. Hitoshi would have happily told him and pointed him out, but the blonde never showed up. He cursed himself for not thinking things through properly in his sleep-deprived state. Of course, servants wouldn't just be milling about, all of them knowing to stay out of the noble's way unless they were carrying trays of food and drinks. But his family was kind to their staff, so it wasn't uncommon to see a few maids hiding in the wings to talk about the dresses they saw, or several knights dressed in their uniform to be stationed nearby to show off the kingdom's strength. So he hoped that the servant would poke his head in at some point. He had to with how much he seemed to love dancing, but he never showed himself. He could feel his parents get antsy as he continued to turn potential partners down and spent most of his night seated with them, so he had the best view of the ballroom. "Have they showed up yet?" his papa asked for the 5th time, after he turned down a very persistent Mona for a dance. "Not yet, but he will. I know he will." "Clever," his father mumbled, his signature terrifying grin stretching across his face. "What a particularly nasty logical ruse you pulled, Hitoshi." His papa gasped, pointing an accusing finger at him before he could even defend himself. "You lied! There is no special someone. My son lied to me." "I didn't," Hitoshi protested, letting out a sigh once he realized he raised his voice. "I truly have someone in mind, but he just isn't here." He turned away from his parents before he could see the frowns that painted their faces, not wanting their pity. "What's their name?" his father asked instead. "If they're not noble blood, then they might not have gotten an invitation. We could send for someone to bring them here." He cursed at his father for being so logical, clearly knowing his distaste for all nobles in his age range and figuring He cursed at his father for being so logical, clearly knowing his distaste for all nobles in his age range and figuring out he liked someone not within that circle. "His name is—" Hitoshi paused, only now realizing that he doesn't even know the name of the man that he watched dancing. His face became pink in embarrassment at the realization. "I don't know." "You don't know his name?" his father asked, raising an accusing eyebrow. "But I will know him when I see him," he tried to protest, knowing his father still thinks he was lying. His papa pouted beside them. "I hate it when you pull a logical ruse over me. You know I fall for them easily." Hitoshi sighed, already dreading the talk he was surely going to have once the night is over, and her parents is free from the promise they made. He used this time to think, wondering how he was going to see the man again if he didn't even know his name. He supposed he could ask Midoriya or someone else of the staff, but that felt like cheating. The blonde was like his little secret treasure, and he didn't feel like sharing him just yet. His eyes wandered to the dance floor, noting how the dancers were stomping, jumping and running the hard work the servant had just done the night before. One particular dancer seemed to take pleasure as she left her new heels leave scuff marks wherever she went. This will surely need a good scrub after this, he thought before smiling to himself, suddenly very aware of who was likely have to clean it once the night is over and the guests have gone home. He was going to have his dance after all. And he did get his dance. It was even more magical than he had ever thought possible. He noted how nervous the blonde was at first, and chalked it up to being caught by what was essentially his boss, but he found this blushing face and stuttering words cute more than annoying, so he didn't comment on it, even going so far as to tease him a little, enjoying every reaction the other gave him. It only got annoying when the blonde didn't seem to dance with as much confidence or conviction as he did the other night, but he persevered, deciding he wasn't going to leave until he had got the proper dance he promised his parents he would have. He saw the moment that it clicked for the other, watching him intently as he lifted him off the ground and carried him to the side until the dance called for him to put him down. He heard the other let out a small gasp, his eyes wide in wonder as he was held. Hitoshi wanted to give the other space, to ensure he was all right with all this, but he couldn't find it within himself to move his hands from the other's waist, feeling like they belonged there and not wanting to let go of him any time soon. He almost let out a gasp of his own in surprise as the blonde finally looked up at him, his eyes shining like stars in the moonlight. They were so open, full of wonder and emotion, that Hitoshi thought he somehow had died and gone to heaven when he asked ever so nicely to be lifted again. Hitoshi swore he felt his heart stop for a second until it suddenly picked up speed, singing a song that had him itching to twirl the other man in the arms again. He felt himself smile, unable to contain his joy as he agreed to the blonde's request. The dance they shared was one he will never forget, for the first time enjoying himself as they twirled and stepped in moves he had learned in his childhood, but somehow feeling lighter and more excited than it has any right to feel. He wasn't even mad when the blonde tripped, finding the experience far too enjoyable to do anything but laugh in pure happiness. He never felt like this before, and he didn't know how he was supposed to live knowing that he could feel like this all the time if he continued to hold the blonde in front of him. Unfortunately, the pretty blonde seemed to have other plans, quickly stepping away from him and collecting his things before leaving with a bow. He tried to call after him, wondering where he went wrong, but the blonde was long gone by the time he stood up. "At least tell me your name," he mumbled out to no one, suddenly feeling cold and isolated in a big room without the blonde by his side. Sighing, he turned to leave, wondering if he could maybe get a few minutes of sleep before he was due for breakfast. Turning with a slump in his shoulders and his head low, he started on his walk of shame towards his room, his mind trying to understand why the other ran. A sudden loud slurping noise caught his attention. Snapping his eye to the left and seeing his father's judging eyes staring right back at him while he sipped his morning coffee. "Shit," he thought to himself as he let out a sigh and started to make his way over to him, neither needing to communicate with actual words to know that his father wanted to speak with him. "Was that him?" his father asked as soon as he was in earshot. Hitoshi nodded his head, too embarrassed to dare and use his actual voice. He seemed to be in a hurry to leave. Hitoshi glared at the ground, not wanting to admit the blonde ran away from him. He said he had a lot of work to finish. His father hummed non-committally. That family always did take their jobs a little too seriously. "So you know who he is?" Hitoshi asked hopefully, glad that he would finally know the other's name. "Are you saying you still don't?" His father quickly countered, letting out a sigh when Hitoshi didn't answer him. His father turned to leave after that, mumbling about stupid kids and young love. "Wait!" he called out, making his father turn towards him. "Are you saying you're not going to tell me?" "That would be correct." "Why not?" His father looked towards the rising sun, seeming to be contemplating something before speaking again. "Let's just say I know the story, and it is better to figure it out on your own." "But how will I get to talk to him if I don't know where to find him?" he protested. "He will find you," came the wise reply back. "Lad blondes always seem to show up when you least expect them," he said with a fond smile, probably thinking about his husband. "You won't tell Papa about this, right?" Hitoshi asked, instead of pressing for more answers he knew he wouldn't get. "For now," his father said softly. "You don't need all these questions when you don't even know his name." Hitoshi let out a sigh of relief, really not wanting to deal with his papa, but his father's smile let him know this wasn't a permanent deal. "I'll only stay quiet for so long. In the meantime, you better fix your mess before it gets any worse." With that, the king left, leaving him with more questions than answers, but also more time. He took a deep breath to clear his head, determined that the next time he saw the blonde he would do everything in his power to ensure he not only left with his name but also with him as his intended. "Look how well that turned out," he thought bitterly as he continued walking down the hall, his sore mood returning as he thought about what happened not even a few minutes ago. Yes, he did leave knowing the blonde's name, but he still fled the room like a bat out of hell before he even had a chance to talk with him. It was like Denki was only calm and collected when they danced, the other becoming so scattered and all over the place the moment they finished. He thought that this time would be different, seeing how they were able to finish the song without interruption or random puddles he needed to clean up. They even had a conversation before they started, feeling proud that the other felt safe enough to confess his worries. Denki also stayed well after the last note rang out in his arms, so he also knew he didn't want to part too quickly, but he still was the one to pull away in the end. He couldn't wrap his head around why. Denki obviously liked dancing with him. The answer was written all over his face. Was it because other people were there? No, that can't be it, because what made him run the first time? The people there probably didn't help though, especially Erie's comment. He let out an annoyed huff at the memory. He loved his sister, but she still had a tendency to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and implying he liked someone else while he was dancing with the person he did like wasn't helpful. Was that why he ran? He did say something about finding someone that would make me truly dance, But couldn't he see that he was the one? Hitoshi was still pondering this as his feet led him to a closed door. He paused long enough to figure out what part of the castle he was in and let out a small chuckle. Of course, his feet led him to his father's studies, knowing he needed help even before his brain wanted to admit it. He was about to knock on the door when a familiar loud voice could be heard yelling through the door. "He was dancing, Shota! Do you not see how big of a deal this is?" Instantly realizing they were talking about him, Hitoshi silently opened the door just a crack, wanting to know what his papa was going to do now that the cat was out of the bag. "I understand that seeing our introverted son express himself might seem—" "Forget expressing himself. Our boy is in love with a capital L." Papa stomped around the room, seeming to need to get his excess energy out. "Ugh! How could I be so blind? The answer was within our castle walls since the beginning. I knew I should have introduced the two when they were younger." "No, you shouldn't have," his father said with a sigh. "And why not? It would have probably saved us the trouble of planning a ball in the first place. Because you know as well as me that if Hitoshi even got an inkling that you were trying to set him up, he would have hated Denki out of spite." "Well, yeah, I guess. Dang it, why did we have to raise such an intelligent boy?" His father snorted. "Not to mention you know how the Kaminaris are. They are loyal and good people at heart, but they just can't mix with us." "What do you mean by that?" Hitoshi asked, swinging the door open the rest of the way so that they could step inside the room. "Hitoshi," Papa yelled at him, "how many times do I have to tell you that it's rude to eavesdrop on other people's conversations?" "What do you mean Denki and I can't mix?" he asked again stubbornly, looking at his father right in the eyes, silently telling him he isn't backing down this time around. His father sighed from behind his desk, leaning back in his chair in exhaustion. "I didn't mean anything by it, Hitoshi." "Then what did you mean?" He pushed and got another sigh in return. "I see that you learned his name." Hitoshi felt his eyebrow twitch in annoyance, hating his father's roundabout way of answering his questions. "I did," he stated simply, not wanting to admit he had learned it after Eri had said it out loud. "Do you know his last name?" No, it didn't come up." Hitoshi glared at the ground, feeling like even his small accomplishment wasn't even worth it if he apparently missed such a crucial detail as his last name. "His last name shouldn't even really matter," his brain supplied unhelpfully. "He's going to have yours soon anyway." "Denki is a Kaminari," his papa suddenly spoke up from where he still stood, his voice gentle as he spoke. "A Kaminari? Isn't that—" "The name of the family that has been serving our family since the beginning," his father finished for him. "The Kaminaris come from a long line of handmaids, knights, butlers, and basically any other job that can be done while serving the crown. They are our biggest supporters and the most loyal people our family has ever known." "But why does that matter?" Hitoshi pressed on. "His family has been working with us for years, so what?" His parents shared a look, silently communicating with each other before seeming to come to a conclusion. Hitoshi crossed his arms in annoyance, feeling every time they did that in his presence the conclusion was always along the lines of, "Is our son really that dense?" "Do you know how I met your papa, Hitoshi?" his father asked, and got another sigh out of him. "Hooray, another roundabout answer." "I was just a mere 10 at the time, finally old enough to go on adventures I always dreamed of," his papa said with a flurry, waving his arms as if he was telling a heroic tale. "I had found a travelling bard in my town and begged him to train me, showing him already impressive skills I should convince him to let me tag along. And you know what?" he asked Hitoshi excitedly. "What?" he said back, with as little enthusiasm as possible. "It worked!" his father cheered, undisturbed by his son's lack of enthusiasm. "Soon I was travelling everywhere, playing in bars and learning all kinds of different songs. It was a perfect life." His papa paused, turning to look at his husband with nothing but love and mischief in his eyes. "Well, almost perfect." "As a young prince," his father continued the story where his husband left off, "I was much like Eri, running and hiding away from my responsibilities for as long as possible. Thankfully, Eri isn't as rebellious as I and actually stays on castle ground." "Are you saying you used to sneak out as a kid?" Hitoshi asked, with a little disbelief in his voice. His father only shrugged. "Hormones make you do stupid things." His husband snorted at the choice of words and got a small smile out of him before he continued his story. Anyway, one day after successfully sneaking out, I went to this pub where I knew a lot of nights hung out. There I saw this lanky teen with long blonde hair belting his little heart out as he shredded on his lute. The crowd was going wild. Someone even smashed a table from how hardcore my music skills were. Shota cleared his throat, giving his husband a deadpan stare and only getting a sheepish smile in return, his husband settling back down. Somehow I was charmed. Hitoshi snorted, always finding his parents' dynamic amusing. So after he set, I went and talked to him, his father continued. We talked until it was late and the pub was closing with promises to meet again the next night. I was already smitten with the mysterious dark-eyed hottie that complimented my eyes, his papa added on, enjoying the light blush on his husband's face as he admitted his cheesy words. The only problem was, he didn't introduce himself to me. I didn't know his name or title. You didn't know he was the crown prince? Hitoshi asked curiously. I wasn't from around here and had never seen him before, his papa said with a shrug. And I did everything I could to ensure he didn't find out, his father concluded. Hisashi treated me like everyone else, and I didn't want my title to ruin our relationship or make him think he couldn't be himself around me. But then I found out, Hisashi said with a laugh, none of the humour really in it. His father grimaced at the sound, guilt written on his face. In my defence, I was going to tell you, but you just beat me to it. I played at the castle for his birthday, his papa explained to him, glaring at his father in a way he had never seen before. I felt hurt that he didn't trust me with this information, but in the end I understand why he couldn't. His papa then nodded, as if double-checking that what he said was true. No, part that really hurt was thinking he was pretending to be my friend in order to get away from his perfect life. What? Hitoshi was appalled by his papa's answer. How could you think that? If you knew father at all, you would have known that he wouldn't spare you a second glance if he thought you weren't worth his time. Well, he gave me all his time in the world, so how was I supposed to know? Hisashi countered. I felt like I was his escape from reality, which was fine, but I didn't know that the reality he was trying to escape was so different from mine. I grew up playing music and singing in ruddy pubs. I had no idea how to act around royalty, what I was supposed to say to them, or how to treat Shota now that I knew the truth. The same way you always have? Hitoshi answered his papa's rhetorical question. He liked you for you, so there is no need for the other stuff. Hisashi didn't know that, though, his father slowly explained. He didn't know Prince Shota or how he was different from the Shota he knew. He just knew that royalty came with standards that he typically didn't fit in. So, he learned. He's a great king now, and you always told me that it didn't matter that status. A person's a person no matter what. And you are free to choose and love whoever you want, no matter their status, job, or appearance. Hisashi finished for Hitoshi, giving his son's shoulder a squeeze in pride. You are 100% correct. You know that very well, but I for sure didn't back then. All of a sudden, Shota was introducing me to the king and queen, and I had no idea what to do. I literally ran away from them in fear. You ran from the king and queen of the kingdom? Hisashi shrugged. Felt like the safest option at the time. I just bowed at them slowly, bowed out of the room. You said hi. Oh wow, is that a bird? And then sprinted straight into the rose bush outside the courtroom. His father corrected his husband. And yet you still married me, Hisashi teased back. The two stared lovingly at each other for a second before his father suddenly got serious again. Does Denki know about our less than traditional standards of courting? He should, Hitoshi stated uncertainly, thinking back to the problem at hand. If he's part of the Kaminari family, then he should know our legacy well enough that we don't discriminate like that. These changes are somewhat recent, his father explained slowly, and the Kaminaris teach their kids in a somewhat old-fashioned kind of way. It's in their blood, Papa added with a sad nod. The first Kaminari to serve under your father's name was a dying man with no money or property to his name, but a starving family he desperately wanted to take care of. He and his wife vowed to always serve under them as loyal followers as long as we promised to take care of their family. Your ancestor agreed with the terms, and the parents worked under them until they died, teaching their kids to do the same in order to keep the contract in place, his father explained. Every generation after has learned to serve to the best of their abilities to keep the protection and food we provide them. I know Denki's mother went above and beyond other servants to ensure Denki would be taken care of once she was gone. He's the last of their bloodline after all, so once she died it was all up to him to keep the contract she fought so hard for alive. Hisashi added sadly, seeming to pause for a small moment in respect for the older woman. That is insane. He would kick them out just because they weren't the best at their job, Hitoshi yelled in disbelief, having no idea that this arrangement ever existed. We tried to tell them that, Shota sighed, rolling his eyes as he did, but old habits seem to die hard, and no matter what I or even my parents said, they refused to change their ways. They still see us as above them, which is true, Hisashi tried to explain, but not in the way they see it. They still think that they're not supposed to be seen by us, not supposed to look us in the eye or speak to us without being spoken to first. In their eyes we're just not meant to mix. I see, Hitoshi said slowly, seeing the connection to his father's earlier comment but not answering some of his more pressing questions. Or did it? Is that why he doesn't enter the ballroom when a party is going on? He asked his father before shifting his gaze to his papa to see if he held the answer to his questions. Or why I didn't know his name until today? Why he runs away from me like he's afraid I'm going to pull the carpet out from under his feet? Hitoshi paused his little rant, suddenly struck by a terrible idea that scared him more than any other thought he has ever had. Is he scared of me? Oh, no, baby, of course he isn't scared of you, Hisashi said softly, wrapping up his son in a warm hug, like he was trying to protect him from his negative thoughts. He just doesn't understand. He does know you plan on making him your intended, right? His father asked, his voice soft more so than accusing. No, Hitoshi mumbled pitifully. I wanted to, after dancing with him again, but he ran before I had the chance. He let out a huff of frustration, leaning into his papa's embrace for comfort. Eri made a stupid comment about Monoma and then he fled soon after. He probably assumes Monoma is your intended then and felt like he was overstepping, Shota mused to himself and made Hitoshi groan in despair. Ah, baby, it's okay. You still have time to fix this. You can dance with your love again. Hisashi paused, blinking for a second as he thought before suddenly holding Hitoshi's face between his hands. Wait, did you say again? Have you danced with him before and didn't tell me? You still have the ball coming up, his father said, looking around his husband so he could look Hitoshi in the eye. You can make your intention known then. How do I do that? Hitoshi asked, his voice a little muffled by how hard his papa was squeezing his face. Hey, don't ignore me and answer the question. I think you already know the way to his heart, his father answered with a shrug. You just have to get him to agree to dance with you at the ball. Wait, did you know? Shota, are you telling me you knew about Denki but didn't tell me? But we already discussed how he doesn't go to balls, so how do I get him to go to this one? I don't know. I somehow figured it out with your lovely papa. Do not try and butter me up when you are still clearly ignoring me. I'm sure the next ruler of this kingdom can figure something out. Hitoshi let out a groan, prying his face out of his papa's grasp as he did. Wow, thanks. You're welcome, his father said back, holding up his cup of coffee in a form of salute. We're rooting for you. He rolled his eyes, feeling like he had enough of his parents' antics for one day, and started to head for the door. Wait, Hitoshi, Hisashi yelled after him, making him turn towards his papa just before he stepped out of the room. Yes? I agree with your father that you should figure this out yourself, but I can tell you that during the balls, Denki is usually in the kitchen cleaning silverware. Usually nothing can get him to leave his post with how many spoons people seem to need, but I could probably pull some strings and get him to bop his head out. Hitoshi smiled at his papa, thankful to have such caring parents willing to help him out. Thank you, I appreciate it. He turned to look at his other dad, nodding at him in thanks as well, and getting one back in return. Well, if you appreciate us so much, Hisashi drawled, leaning on his husband's desk to rest his head in his hand like a love-struck teen would do. How about you tell me about the first time you danced with Denki? You know, the thing you are clearly hiding from me. Oh, do you hear that? I think I hear Bakugo yelling for me. Can't leave the captain of the guards waiting. No, Hitoshi, come back! You have to tell me! Shota, quit laughing at me! Hitoshi smiled at his parents' antics as he walked away from the room, new confidence coursing through him as he slowly put a plan together to ensure Denki danced with him at the ball.